Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's John Davidson, your host for Career Coaching After Hours. It's episode 27. It's February 2026, and we're going to either deep dive or dive right off the deep end into LinkedIn, one of my favorite topics. So, very happy to be getting back to this topic. I talk about LinkedIn all the time with my clients, and full disclosure, I've been a paid consultant for LinkedIn, and my profile turned 20 this year. So I've been using LinkedIn since 2006 and very much enjoy the topic, but gosh, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to LinkedIn in terms of some of their changes to privacy settings, some of the data that we're seeing in terms of skills on the rise and how people are using the platform, and even how to build more authority and build an audience and how LinkedIn has adjusted their algorithms. So it's a massively growing platform. We're up to 1.3 billion users globally, but I think there are a lot of folks, I know there are quite a few folks, I should say, who look at LinkedIn as maybe not just social media or professional social media, but maybe just Tinder in a top hat or Bumble in a blazer, or essentially the social media you need when you're looking for a new job. But I think it's lots of things to lots of people. So we'll dig in a little bit. We've got quite a few reference points for you to take a look at, and I'm going to try to summarize some of the big topics of the day. This probably should be broken up into about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 episodes, but we'll make it work. All right, so I appreciate you joining me. Career Coaching After Hours is a series that is audience agnostic, so if you're one of my clients, thanks for watching, but I'm assuming most of you are not my client, so this is more maybe generalized information, not specific advice. And so if you'd like to schedule a consultation with me, feel free to do so. And as usual, disclaimers, consider consulting your own career coach directly if you want one-on-one suggestions or advice. And as usual, everything is to the best of my knowledge, and check those sources. I'll have those in the posting notes here, some of the citations from Inc. Magazine and Business Insider and some other good sources there. But also feel free to check my credentials and background, and you can see those kind of things on either my website or, heck, why not LinkedIn? Feel free. All right. So is LinkedIn completely bananas? Well, maybe, but I talk about it all the time with clients. So frequently when I work with clients, for example, I'll have their LinkedIn profile pulled up and kind of nudge them to keep in mind that your LinkedIn profile can in fact be seen by millions and millions of humans all over the world. And so one of my theses, and big points I drive home with folks is we probably live in an era where whatever your role is, whether you're an active professional or a retired professional, or a doctor, a lawyer, a surgeon, an aerospace professional, tech professional, might not be a bad idea to have a LinkedIn profile for one reason or another. But people have very different opinions of what the platform is, what it does, some of the issues and pitfalls. And I think a lot of times LinkedIn maybe stumbles into the legitimacy concern bucket, as in, what is it, just Tinder in a top hat or Bumble in a blazer? Is it really all that useful outside of maybe just finding a job kind of thing? Or is it a platform to help folks build authority, build an audience, build a business even? So certainly I have my opinions, but generally I think it's pretty darn useful. I nudge most folks to at least give it a try. And I'll dive into some of my thoughts and some of my reactions to some of the reports I've been seeing here this year in 2026. Lots of interesting stuff. So maybe one of the big ticket topics I try to drive home with clients is just how massive the platform is. And I just grabbed these stats here, so these are fresh. Feel free to take a look. But about a year ago, I did a presentation. LinkedIn was at the, I believe, 1.1 billion mark. I believe it was 2023 where LinkedIn hit 1 billion members globally, but we're already up to 1.3 billion members here early 2026. So pretty massive. 200 countries and no signs of LinkedIn slowing down. And I've argued many times to clients, maybe LinkedIn is the one social media platform you probably should invest in, and kind of expand on that 9 to 5 persona versus what's the value to you individually as, let's say, a job seeker, a professional, to have Meta or Facebook or X or Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and the others. Maybe they're more for fun, and LinkedIn is more for work purposes, professional development purposes. But I don't know if we can even answer what is LinkedIn. And so I've said many, many times that I believe it's an LLM. It's a large language model. It's a programmable, trainable platform that we can use for our benefit and build authority and build an audience. It can be quite useful. But you could say it also has some fun elements, and you're seeing more stories, and I'll talk about one where people are using it maybe to find out a little bit more about their friends, their family, or even in dating partners, as in kind of the Bumble in a blazer, Tinder in a top hat conundrum. But certainly there are some privacy issues that come up, and I'll talk about that a little bit, how to get your profile dialed in according to your belief system around privacy and notoriety, and some interesting reports on some of the changes to LinkedIn's algorithms. So if you're going to post data or write posts and articles, how can we do that effectively? And then just recently, a new skills report was released for 2026. So I'm going to try to keep all of this awesomeness contained in one episode, but it probably should be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 episodes, but I'll do my best. But so here's a graphic that I built to kind of get a sense of what in the world LinkedIn is. And I think most of us on Earth who have a LinkedIn profile probably are still kind of teasing this out and figuring it out. So even what is a platform? What's it supposed to do? Should you have one? Certainly I've worked with clients who don't have a profile and maybe don't want one. We could make an argument maybe that corporate espionage starts on LinkedIn. And I've had clients where I've even recommend they kind of think twice about even having a profile. And yet a lot of us who do have a profile certainly will fill in information about our career and a little bit of information in terms of how to contact us, at least through the platform, maybe education, training, interests, those kind of things. So somewhat of an online resume. And the first time I heard about LinkedIn was on NPR. I was driving to work back in 2006, and I thought, gosh, I better check that out. That sounds a little more interesting than MySpace and what they've got brewing over there. But I believe LinkedIn is a great place to showcase achievements that you're fine with expanding and listing out for a public audience. But it probably is quite a bit more than just an online resume, as in, of course, you can connect with colleagues and coworkers and supervisors and alums and friends and family. So not just a small group of only friends and family, perhaps, like maybe the more true core social media platforms. But some people might say it really is a professional networking platform. And so Viva LinkedIn, have a massive range of folks in your network. Try to get 500, 5,000, 50,000 connections. Where other folks, again, might use Tinder, Bumble, or Facebook as examples of, well, LinkedIn is just kind of a dressier version of all of them. So something to think about. And I'm amazed by how many folks who have LinkedIn maybe haven't written down a professional goal statement for themselves. Or maybe, why do you use LinkedIn? How does that factor in? Is it relevant to you to even have a profile? Kind of thing. But I would caution folks to be careful about closing their profile. If you do that, getting it back is virtually impossible. And if you've written some recommendations for folks, those do go away. So I think there's some real fallout from folks, and I've seen folks actually do that and delete their profile. So that's pretty extreme. But another issue that comes up a lot, of course, yes, is privacy. And so here is actually text that I send out when I connect with folks, where I'll put in a couple of links, and they're in the notes there here on YouTube, a couple of FAQs, where you can really pick through how comfortable you are and then alignment with your comfortability with who can see and how you share data on LinkedIn. And so this is a big one that's been coming up. I actually just did a screen grab of mine. Mine's been turned off since I learned about this, so that data for generative AI, for example, is turned off. So I don't particularly want my data being used for Microsoft's training purposes, Microsoft being the parent company of LinkedIn. So if you want to take a look at those might help you. And I nudge my clients frequently to review the privacy and notoriety settings inside of LinkedIn on a regular basis and be comfortable with what you're putting into the platform and then how you're sharing it. So, all right. I mean, are there privacy concerns with LinkedIn? Well, I'd say so. And this is actually a really interesting article that popped up here just this month, fresh article, from Inc. And so I've elbowed clients to consider getting verified on LinkedIn. And so part of that, can be directly verified there. You can tag in even your work email, make sure you're able to log in effectively. You've got more than one email address tagged to your account, make sure it's up to date, those kind of things. But really interesting concept here is that getting verified on LinkedIn may actually expose your personal data, your biometric data, or personally identifiable information, PII. And so this, I don't know if this is making me second guess my approach to this, but persona identities is this third-party entity, at least as far as now, that's actually responsible for taking your information and kind of sitting between you, the user, and LinkedIn. And so I think kind of an interesting idea if you want to read through the article about who has your data. And this sometimes pops up where, yes, you can tie LinkedIn to other platforms. One of my favorite examples of this that I think is very positive, for example, is Duolingo. So you can tie your Duolingo language learning account to your LinkedIn profile and share that information. So for example, you can see my really low Spanish score from Duolingo, but it does verify through LinkedIn. So I think this kind of brings up some interesting topics about if you want those verification badges, if you want to prove that you are who you say you are, or you have certain skills, you might be giving up some of that privacy for maybe more notoriety or more believability. So it raises some interesting questions. But a really neat article that I think is very well worth reading, whether you're in the dating scene or not, or whether you're kind of thinking about the deeper ramifications of LinkedIn, is Loving the Time of LinkedIn. It's in Business Insider. Shouldn't be paywalled, but brings up some good points about what LinkedIn can be used for, and maybe some warnings in terms of folks who've actually been stalked, maybe not quite doxxed, but maybe stalked or pinged by significant others on the platform, and I think raises some alarms and kind of drives home those points of make sure you're comfortable with your privacy settings and know how to block people. And just because you have a LinkedIn profile doesn't mean you need to take any guff from someone, kind of thing. And just to be extra careful, because there can be quite a lot of information on LinkedIn. You can put in a great deal of info into the platform, and I don't think I need that. There we go. But I think instructive. And so, when I talk to clients about their profile, many times I'll kind of nudge them to consider putting more into the platform, so it's maybe easier for recruiters to find them, for example. Maybe we can create some more interest or buzz around the profile. But there are some possible scary ramifications with that as well, as in if you're putting more info out there, then is that something you maybe want to counterbalance? So I think a good, solid, instructive article, and the author spoke to several individuals, but yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think even as career coaches, career counselors need to be careful, me included, of course, wholeheartedly recommending LinkedIn and saying, certainly I don't tell all of my clients you must use it or you must put maximum information out there. If anything, I elbow clients, like I say, to really dig into those privacy settings and feel comfortable. And I thought this was kind of an instructive quote. LinkedIn lurking, whether it's a recruiter or an ex-significant other, could feel threatening. And a lot of folks, for example, feel like they need to pay because LinkedIn has this freemium model, quote unquote freemium, so it's free. But if you opt for the premium features, you can see who's actually looking at your profile. And folks may be feeling the need to pay for those extra features to see who's kind of checking them out. And so I think some interesting ramifications, and certainly that affects LinkedIn's revenue, and I'll get into that. So LinkedIn has some pretty epic revenue numbers here recently, but there we go. So it's a privacy tax concept. So interesting concept, but again, maybe if nothing else, if you pull this away from this presentation, is go double check, if you have a LinkedIn profile, of course, double check those privacy and notoriety settings. And I've said this many, many times in the past, if you want more notoriety and more visibility on LinkedIn or socials, you may in fact be giving up quite a bit of privacy, and kind of vice versa. So to try to find that right mix for you is a really good question, and maybe that's a different mix depending on the platform. And so I don't think at all a bad idea to consider your tolerances for LinkedIn versus maybe Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or other social media platforms. So not to jump on my soapbox, but I try to elbow folks to kind of make their own decisions, get comfortable with their decisions. But so often when I talk about LinkedIn, it's algorithms, 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 not too different than some of the topics that come up when I talk about resumes and applicant tracking systems and ATS. But a couple of interesting articles that I bumped into recently, really trying to tease out how to kind of hack LinkedIn, as in if you're going to write posts or articles, how do you be that ultimate influencer? How do you get more views? How do you get more followers? How do you get more connections on LinkedIn? And I think somewhat instructive, but I take them with a grain of salt, as in, if you're building a LinkedIn presence, so often I work with folks who really want a solid level of authority. And so how many likes you get on any one post may not matter in the grand scheme of things. Kind of play the long game. And so a few things I think are interesting to pull out of these articles. One, if you're posting on LinkedIn, one piece of advice I would have is try not to just repost. I see a lot of folks simply just reposting things from other folks on LinkedIn without adding their 2 cents. But arguably, LinkedIn is putting more of a premium on saves. So if you're writing something on LinkedIn, if you have an opinion on LinkedIn, maybe adding in some citations, making it save worthy, really putting some good solid effort into it so that more people actually save that content, want to come back to it, which I think is a great concept. So I'd like to believe that LinkedIn is improving. Of course, a lot of us are seeing more sponsored ads, more advertisements on LinkedIn, kind of crowding out good quality content. So I've grouched about that to LinkedIn myself. I don't use sponsored content myself, for example. But another concept that I think is really interesting is this idea of consistency. So if you're wherever your expertise lies, maybe posting once a week, once a month, on some kind of a regular basis, where I see so many folks kind of ignore their LinkedIn profile until they're looking for a job or until a layoff hits or something like that. Kind of gets into this concept of treating LinkedIn like a dating site. And it seems so many folks only fire up LinkedIn or blow the dust off when they absolutely need to, kind of as a negative response, as opposed to kind of building that authority and that consistent level of expressing your experience as an expert on a regular basis. So posting consistently is a really interesting idea there. I think that's a great article to take a look at there. Another one's a little bit maybe deeper in terms of AI search visibility. So whether you're a business owner or maybe you're a practitioner in your field, you're a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, or you're an employer at a major corporation, arguably that's your flag in the ground. LinkedIn is maybe a substitute for a website or a substitute for a blog. I've said this many times over the years, that it's a low cost, low barrier for folks to really create a presence online without having to fire up a website or create a business necessarily. But LLMs, and my thesis has been that LinkedIn has been an LLM for a while now, is LinkedIn hopefully skewing towards expertise. And so if you really do know about, if you're an electrician, for example, and you're writing about electrical issues or safety on a job site, in theory, LinkedIn should ping that and then process that accordingly so people see that and your post gets a lot of views. Or if you're a neurosurgeon and you're writing about brain surgery, then in theory, LinkedIn would be promoting that more so. But I think, again, some of the challenges with all the promoted content and paid content is that crowded out function. So I would nudge folks to also play that long game. So whatever your presence is on LinkedIn, is think about that presence as something that extends even through retirement potentially, or even semi-retirement. So there we be, just a thought. But maybe instead of chasing likes, building a series of posts that are genuinely relevant, not just to you, but to your LinkedIn community, but also that might be sized up, for example, in a job interview. So for example, if you're in a job interview, I think it's perfectly reasonable that an employer might take a look at your posts on LinkedIn and kind of gauge the appropriateness factor, your expertise factor, based on what you're writing. So this kind of idea of publish or perish that a lot of college professors like to mention. Okay, transitioning just a bit. Has LinkedIn gone full TikTok mode? I don't think so, but maybe. And so I've linked over to a couple of articles. There's Inc. I think the GeekWire article is really instructive there. And so you see his quote right here, and I thought it was really interesting when Microsoft offered to buy LinkedIn. Final price tag, $26 billion. Wow, that seemed like a lot of money 10 years ago. But it kind of blows my mind that purchase is generating about that much revenue every 15 months. Wow, so almost every year and a half, LinkedIn is cranking out some really heavy-duty revenue. Whoa. So you could say this is not too dissimilar maybe than Disney purchasing Lucasfilm and all the George Lucas properties and making their money back arguably pretty darn quickly as a good investment. But like I say, one thing to look for is look at the changes to privacy settings, notoriety settings. And again, I tend to be pretty pro Microsoft, being they're based in Redmond. And I actually thought that was a pretty good thing in terms of stabilizing LinkedIn's presence as a platform, to have such a large corporate owner as LinkedIn, or as Microsoft for the platform. But I think it's instructive, as in, remember, LinkedIn it's not a non-profit. It's definitely a for-profit engine. And even if you're on the free model, you could make a good argument that, kind of like with Gmail or any other free product, that if you're not paying for it, maybe you are the product in essence. So keeping in mind that your feed, if you're seeing more ads, if you're seeing material that isn't all that relevant, you as a user may have to pedal harder, push harder, work harder to get your feed and your profile to really work for you, and kind of train that. And I do nudge folks many times to try the premium model, see if you like it, then end the free tour, or maybe pay on a monthly basis, so you're not effectively trapped or handcuffed to a payment plan for a whole year or something like that. So I'm certainly by no means recommending that everybody jump to the premium plan, but I think pretty instructive. So we may see, like a lot of platforms, some changes that maybe reflect the need to generate revenue. Imagine that kind of thing. So very good. All right. My gosh, so many more topics to dive into. If you'd like to follow up with me, absolutely send me an email or schedule a consultation. One of the first things I typically do when I see a potential new client, for example, is check them out on LinkedIn. So, as I'd hope you'd check me out on LinkedIn before or after reviewing the presentation. So thanks for joining with me here. What do you think? Am I on target? Am I off base? Have I gone off the deep end? Being on LinkedIn for 20 years? Oh my gosh. Feel free to reach out as usual. John at olympicresume.com or olympicresume.com, tacticalmba.com, architectinfinity.com, etc., etc. And wonderful musicians who've helped with the background music, so very much appreciate them. Check them out. And thank you to all my clients, my supporters, all of you, the viewers. Please like, please subscribe, and check out all the cool tools that I use to build these presentations all by myself. So thank you for joining me. I'll see you on LinkedIn, and I'll see you for the next episode. Thanks for joining me. Take care. Be well. Send me an email if you have an idea for a future topic. Please. All right, and take care. All right, bye-bye.